Well, thanks so very much, Craig, for that introduction, and to NCVER for having me along today. It's wonderful to be with you today. It was particularly wonderful, though, to start the day enjoying the kind hospitality of Qantas for an extra couple of hours this morning. So I loved it so much, getting to spend 2/3 of the time it took me from getting on the plane in Canberra to getting off the plane in Sydney sitting on the tarmac at Canberra Airport. The view out of that window of Canberra Airport was sensational. So apologies to you all for causing that rescheduling of the program. But of course the benefit of that rescheduling was that you got to hear from the wonderful and erudite Peter Shergold first. We are indeed fortunate to have, as chair of NCVER, somebody with the intellectual capabilities, with the analytical skills, with the future outlook, with the understanding of public service and of the educational sector that Professor Peter Shergold brings. Thank you, Peter, for serving in that role as chair of NCVER, and thank you very much for the uplifting address you delivered today. To our hosts, not just Peter and Craig and the NCVER team, but of course Professor Barney Glover, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Western Sydney. Of course, Peter Shergold is here wearing dual hats in some ways. He has Craig Fowler seated to his right, his direct report at NCVER, and Barney Glover seated to his left, Peter being the Chancellor here at UWS, and Barney being the Vice-Chancellor, but Barney also is the current Chairman of Universities Australia. To our other co-hosts, it's really great to see UWS teaming up and partnering with the TAFE New South Wales, particularly the Western Sydney Institute and the South West Sydney Institute of TAFE, a wonderful sign of the collaborative approach to learning and education in that post-school environment that happens throughout Western Sydney, and of course exactly the type of thing that Peter just finished speaking about in terms of that recognition of tertiary learning in its entirety, and you see that happening in real life here already in Western Sydney through the partnership approach that UWS takes with TAFE New South Wales. This, of course, is the 24th such NCVER conference, and that's a reminder of the history of the organisation and the importance that governments have long put on NCVER and placed on the work of NCVER to inform good public policy. But today, more than ever, NCVER has a role to play in a much broader landscape than just reporting to governments. And Peter eruditely touched on that before in his presentation about that much broader perspective, and it's certainly something I want to add to today. I particularly welcome the theme for this year's conference. The No Frills theme works hand in hand with our government's approach of wanting to make sure that what we're achieving in vocational education and training, in skills, in apprenticeships, is about outcomes, is about ensuring that all of our investment, all of our energies is delivering the best possible outcomes for students, for employers, for training organisations of whatever nature they may be, ultimately, of course, for the Australian economy and the benefit of all of Australia into the future by having the most productive, well-trained workforce and population best able to take advantage of and capitalise on the developments in our economy wherever they may go in the years and decades into the future. At the heart of our national competitiveness agenda, centred around 4 pillars, one of those key pillars is the recognition as a government of skills development and having relevant skills, especially skills that are relevant to the changes in our region. We're having signed the free trade agreements as we have with China and Japan and South Korea, and currently negotiating with India. It's a real demonstration of the fact that we view the Australian economy as being open to the world, particularly open to our region, and with that is an importance that we seize that opportunity to take advantage of that openness, and in taking advantage of the openness to the region, we are developing people with skills to be able to capitalise on providing the goods and the services that the region demands, and being able to ensure that Australian businesses are well placed to operate not just here in Australia but throughout the world in our increasingly globalised and highly technological environment. I want to particularly welcome the three themes that this conference will be addressing. Firstly, the outlook and perspective around youth. We do have a continuing problem in Australia around youth unemployment, and there's no point burying our head in the sand that more needs to be done to make sure that young people are able to transition from school through whatever learning pathway is appropriate and most relevant to them to access the skills that will help them secure improved employment prospects in the future. Our most recent budget as a government had as its centrepiece a $5.5 billion small business package, a package that also had sitting within it $330 million to invest in particular youth employment strategies. Now that of course is complemented in the VET portfolio by our annual $6 billion contribution that we make towards vocational education and training. And it's my job as the dedicated minister in this space to try to ensure that every dollar of that contribution, whether it's made through direct Commonwealth investment or expenditure, whether it's made via contributions to the states and territories, whether it's made via income contingent loans that students apply through their choices, that every dollar of that expenditure is delivering the best possible outcome for taxpayers and the best possible outcome for our economy. We particularly need to see greater success in transitioning young people, as I say, from school into work, and our youth employment strategy as part of the recent budget will be really targeting disengaged young people, helping them to get the skills, the motivation, the support necessary to re-engage with education, with training or with employment outcomes. Your second theme around pathways is an equally important one, and especially in terms of understanding the changing environment in the education landscape. That pathways are no longer linear, that people choose different stages of life to opt in and out of learning, that they will choose to mix up their own different courses. And you heard that from Peter Shergold before, that we do have to understand and appreciate the very different environment in which today's students and tomorrow's students will access education, whatever the nature in the tertiary sector, that they will be pursuing a different environment from a linear pathway of entering the course at one point, exiting at another point, and enjoying a career based just upon that sole qualification. We hear very much people talk about people having many different careers or jobs during their lifetime. That of course necessitates them having many different training opportunities and educational opportunities during their lifetime to be able to fulfil those career and employment potentials. And the third theme, skills. And that's very much central to the approach our government has taken in looking at vocational education and training reforms to date. That skills must be relevant to job outcomes. That what is being taught in relation to the competencies and the skill sets that people should be achieving when undertaking a vocational education and training qualification must be competencies and skill sets that employers value, must be competencies and skill sets that will make the individual more employable, must be competencies and skill sets that evolve and adapt with the changing nature of jobs as technology and demographics impacts upon the changing nature of what those jobs may be. That's why we're reforming the way training packages are developed. It's why we're reforming who is responsible for the management and maintenance and development of those training packages. It's why we want to put greater emphasis wherever possible on having quality assessment processes in place, because it is really at that assessment point that we should be able to guarantee that competencies have been met, that skill sets have been met, and that we are genuinely delivering qualifications that are reliable for employers, for industry, for the Australian economy into the future. Of course, at the heart of considering why we're here today at the NCVER conference is to understand and realise that the key to good decision making is always the evaluation of the available information. And that holds true for all of the stakeholders in the VET sector. Policymakers, students, their families, employers, training organisations, all of them require quality information to be able to make good decisions. And the key to having reliable information is, of course, having accurate data and well-informed analysis that underpins that. And NCVER is the peak body, the key institution for all of those stakeholders in bringing together quality data, quality analysis that results in high quality information that can enable stakeholders in the vet sector to make and undertake well-informed decisions. Today I really want to encourage you, as you go through the different discussions on the conference agenda, to focus on three particular questions that I hope will help to inform the recommendations and suggestions that come out of your deliberations. Firstly, to ask the question very clearly, are we collecting the right information, the right data? Now, you just heard from Peter Shergold that NCVER currently holds around 73 million individual records. It's a vast amount of data, but is it the right data? Now, in this room today, of course, we have people, some of whom help to design what the data is that's collected, some of whom are filling out the forms and providing that data. All of you will have your own perspective. Some of you are reliant upon it to actually make decisions. And through each of those different perspectives and prisms, I hope and trust you will be able to critically assess, is it the right data? How can we improve it? There's no point collecting data for data's sake. It must be data that empowers information development, empowers analysis of that information, and ultimately empowers better informed decision making. Better informed decision making by the 3 million students who access vocational education and training each and every year. We want them to be able to make well-informed choices, a topic that I'll come back to shortly. Better informed decisions by employers, who are often the drivers behind somebody accessing and utilising vocational education and training. We should, in the vet space in particular, though it equally applies to a degree in the university sector as well, remember that employers are often that key driver of deciding what type of training somebody is undertaking, and that they need to be able to ensure they're accessing the right training, the right qualification, the right course provided by the right provider for their business needs and for their employee. We shouldn't underestimate the importance of the data and analysis that's available to our regulators, that they equally require good information to be able to be making risk-based assessments of who to be auditing, when to be auditing them, what qualifications to be auditing. That regulators require the type of information that is being provided, and that NCVER will become an increasingly important source of information for those regulators. Of course, for public policy makers, we face the particular questions of what to subsidise in the vet space, by how much to subsidise it, in what volume to subsidise it, for how long to subsidise it. These are very significant questions that state and territory governments in particular grapple with year after year. And when we all get frustrated, as I do as the federal minister, with constantly changing, it seems, parameters of how the states and territories choose to fund or subsidise training, we probably need to recognise that one of the problems they grapple with is sometimes a paucity of quality information on which to make their decisions. It's not easy to decide what to subsidise when you have a finite budget, as we all do at all levels of government, and to what extent you invest in those subsidies. So quality information is critical for those public policy making outcomes. And of course, training organisations themselves benefit greatly from being able to compare and contrast their performance against the performance of their competitors, of the rest of the sector, to be able to assess from the data better ways in which they can innovate or they can lift and improve their student satisfaction. So are we collecting the right information to enable all of those different and diverse stakeholders to be able to make well-informed decisions and choices? The second question that I'd ask is, of course, are we collecting the information in the most efficient and least burdensome manner possible? As a government, we've been committed overall to trying to reduce red tape, to trying to reduce the cost of regulation across businesses. And we've stripped some $2 billion, it's estimated, worth of regulatory activity out of business costs around Australia per annum. The principle we've been trying to drive towards in the vet sector through our time in government, as we do elsewhere in data use and analysis, is the principle of provide once, use many times. That people should have confidence that they don't need to provide different arms of government with the same information in different ways over and over again. Now, you're all well aware, and Peter touched brilliantly on the two central reforms that are being pursued at present: total vet activity reporting and the unique student identifier. And these are critical reforms that should enable us to be able to reduce over time the burden on training providers, on employers and on students to have to provide ever-increasing amounts of information. In total vet activity reporting, we're going to now enjoy the most comprehensive national outlook in terms of analysis and data richness of RTOs around Australia. In that first round, I understand some 3,800 providers submitted data under TVA. 1,400 of them did so for the very first time through to NCVER. A huge proportion of people providing information that we've never had before to help inform that decision making by all of the different vet stakeholders. On the USI side of the ledger, we've managed to deliver more than 2.5 million unique student identifiers just in the space of this year. And on both of those big policy reforms, I want to thank and congratulate the training providers in particular, but all of those who have been so central to ensuring their uptake and success to date. I've been amazed, having stepped into the portfolio in December, that we've been able to roll out something like the USI, deliver it to more than 2.5 million people in the space of this year, and I've barely heard a whimper of complaint. It's been an incredible success in that sense, and I know that that is in no small part to the efforts of those on the ground making it work. And I'm sure there have been frustrations. I'm sure there are still some frustrations that we can improve. But it has been incredible to see the rollout of that and the success of it doing so. And the USI will be, as you heard from Peter, particularly important in us being able to, in future, track the personal journey of the student, to understand in that theme you're looking at today of pathways, to understand how they opt in and out, to understand where they choose to access certain competencies rather than an entire qualification, to have a far better appreciation of what is actually happening in the vet sector, and from that, of course, to be able to make much better decisions around public policy. But I do believe that it's critical and that we do have a mutual obligation as such as governments, that when we increase, as we have through TVA and the USI, when we increase the regulatory burden on different sectors, that we find ways to make sure it is as streamlined and efficient and harmonious as it possibly can be. And so our requirement is to absolutely ensure that in getting more data, we are also doing so more efficiently wherever possible. Now, I have a vision for NCVER that is very clearly NCVER becoming the one-stop shop for data collection in the training and vocational education sector right around Australia. That they are the clearinghouse for all the needs, whether they be the needs of the Commonwealth Government, the needs of state and territory governments, or the needs of regulators. That we should be able to have a pathway where the relevant information can be directed and reported through the one mechanism and then utilised by those who may need it for different purposes. And that's certainly a vision that I will pursue with my state and territory counterparts, to see us continue to take steps where we ensure that ASQA's needs, state and territory government needs and our needs are all combined where possible into that single portal, such that people are reporting once and it is used many times wherever and however possible. The final question that I hope we can ask today, having assessed whether we're collecting the right data and then assessed whether we're collecting it in the most efficient way possible, is of course to assess whether we are making it available in the right place, at the right time and in the right format to best enable the choices and decisions that people need to make. As I've tried to tackle some of the problems I've faced in terms of quality in the vet sector since coming in, and especially some of the problems I've faced in the way vet fee help loans have been accessed and rorted in some instances, critical to ensuring the sustainability of a program like vet fee help in the future is that we do have a well-informed market. Because if governments of the future are to continue to back demand-driven programs like vet fee help that are uncapped, that allow the sector to regulate itself in terms of pricing and allow the sector to regulate itself in terms of the number of places offered, then we must have confidence that we're getting high quality outcomes from that investment. And the best way to get high quality outcomes is to have confidence that everybody who is choosing to access an income contingent loan like that through the vet fee help scheme is making that decision because they've made an informed choice on the basis that it will improve their life, it will improve their employment prospects, it will improve their knowledge in a way that will enhance their capacity to make a bigger and better contribution to society. So ensuring we have that informed market is critical, and all of the data, all of the information, all of the analysis must then, of course, be accessible and be easily comparable and enable people to sit down and make the relevant comparisons between different qualifications, to know what is in need in our economy now or in the future that might help provide them with enhanced employment prospects, but then when they know what's in need and what might be of interest to them to study, to also then be able to make the comparisons, not just of the cost of a course, important though that is, or of the price of a course, important though, or of the duration of a course, important though that is, but also to know, of course, the satisfaction of the students who've gone through, the employment outcomes for those who've gone through, the satisfaction levels of the employers who have taken on students from those courses. People need to be able to make those types of comparisons and to make them easily, to be able to make informed choices. I'm pleased that today we're making live the updated version of the My Skills website, the central portal that provides capacity for students and employers, for teachers, for trainers, to be able to compare apples with apples wherever possible in the training sector. The latest changes are a significant rebuild of the site and include new features such as identification of the courses that are linked to jobs or skills that are in demand by state and territory, so that teachers and students and families and employers can identify where there's actually demand for skills and what training might be valuable to undertake. We're able to provide now overall student satisfaction and employment outcomes for the 230 most popular courses. That's a step in the right direction. There's still a long way to go to be able to provide that at a far more comprehensive level. But for those courses, it will allow people to make more direct comparisons of those student and employment satisfaction levels. There's a vet fee help course calculator to help people understand their potential future debt. We will be flagging those RTOs who have had adverse findings made against them by ASQA, so that there is an element of name and shame that comes into the system, so that students, when they're making those comparisons, can be more aware of providers who may not have done the right thing in the past and may be under watch for certain reasons. And it's provided now in a modernised, tablet-optimised homepage design that allows people to be able to access it on the go, as you would expect. In future, as TVA and the USA provide a much richer source of data, I hope and trust that we'll be able to make far greater enhancements to the MySkills website that will ensure much greater comparability by students and their families of student and employer satisfaction outcomes in particular. These future upgrades must make sure that we enhance people's capability to make those informed choices around cost, duration, satisfaction and employment outcomes. Importantly, they must not only help to make those informed choices for those accessing training, but by doing so, they can also help to inspire excellence amongst our training providers. I'm someone who is firmly committed to the view that competition enhances quality. But competition must be competition of people who are aspiring to offer the best, aspiring to offer the most high quality training at the best available price that is most relevant to employment outcomes to Australians. That's the type of training market that I want to see operating, and by giving people the information that empowers them to make informed choices, we can then have confidence that a competitive training market will also see training providers aspiring to be that provider of choice, aspiring to be the ones recognised for their excellence and the relevance of the training that they are providing. So you have a critical role today in assessing where we go in the vocational education and training sector, in particular where NCVER goes in terms of the data it collects, the way it collects that data, and the way we present and use that data and information that is gleaned from it. That critical role is something that I and all future ministers, Commonwealth, state and territory, will rely upon, together with our public services, together with the regulators, to be making the types of informed decisions that will impact upon your jobs, your businesses, the organisations that you will represent today. Peter Shergold set out some ambitious future reforms, which I will take back and discuss with the Minister responsible for the university sector, Christopher Pyne, about what it is we can do to make sure that we are moving absolutely in a harmonious direction, whether it is the quilt standards and making sure that satisfaction is represented as satisfaction no matter what type of training you're accessing, whether the USI has a broader role. And I joked to Barney as Chair of Universities Australia when Peter mentioned the idea of the USI applying right across the tertiary sector, that I looked forward to Universities Australia embracing that idea at an early opportunity. But seriously, it is a serious role today. I value the work that NCVER does, but I place real importance on the work that it can do in the future to help to ensure that ministers like me and all the other stakeholders in the vet sector can make the most informed decisions possible. That's at the heart of NCVER's work, and that's at the heart of the challenge that's before you all today. I wish you well and look forward to hearing the outcomes of your deliberations. Thanks so very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. We are relatively close to tea, but the Minister has graciously indicated that he's more than happy to take questions from the floor. And we have a microphone, and anyone who wishes to make a question, could you state your name and your institution and affiliation, and I'm sure the Minister will answer.
Thank you, Minister, for that synopsis of what things are and where we're going. My question is about your comment that, in your belief, that competition enhances quality. I think to a degree it does, but I think there's some evidence that certain schemes around the country to do with vet, that in fact the opposite has happened. There's been a bit of a drive competitively to the bottom rather than to the top. If you have a comment about that.
Sure, thank you. And that's indeed the point that I was very importantly making there, is that competition has to involve people making well-informed choices. And if they're making well-informed choices that are assessing all of the different metrics that go into a decision to undertake some study, as I said, not just the cost or the duration, but also the quality and the outcomes of that study, then we should have great confidence that competition will improve quality and will inspire training providers to compete to be the provider of choice and to be on a platform of excellence. But where governments, and it is a real problem in terms of governments in particular, where governments put cash on the table through subsidy arrangements or through income contingent loans that are too easily accessed and rorted, then you will see distortions in market behaviour. And that is why we need to make sure that we get the subsidy arrangements right at the same time as creating that more informed marketplace. And the vet sector is no different to anything else. As you heard in the introduction, I previously occupied roles in the environment portfolio, and I was in opposition at the time of the pink bats scandal, the home insulation scandal. Now, in the end, what happened there was government said, here's a lot of money for people to put home insulation in rooftops, and of course, like bees to honey, off created a market that was poorly regulated, poorly structured, and a lot of people moved in very quickly to capitalise on it. Now, our problems in vet are nowhere near that proportion, thankfully. But the problems are real. Obviously, we have acted through new quality standards, through new legislation, and through tightening, in our case, the vet fee help conditions. But the important link that still needs to be created there is to make sure we also have that well-informed marketplace, and that's why I put the importance here. The alternative of not having competition is to go back to a scenario where the only things governments fund or subsidise is a single government-run monopoly-type provider, and that doesn't deliver the best of outcomes either. TAFE does a wonderful job, a brilliant job in many, many instances, but if it's not inspired to be its best self, then we won't get the optimal outcomes there either. So competition is important, but unregulated, poorly incentivised competition will deliver bad outcomes. That's why I want to make sure we get the regulation right, we get the incentive settings right, and we get the information to the marketplace right to ensure people are making those informed choices.
Thank you, Simon, for the very informative address that you've given. I am very much a fan of what you're doing, but one of the things that really concerns me is that there is a tension between job outcomes and career outcomes. And being driven very much by industry, I'm concerned that job outcomes are going to perhaps risk career outcomes for students.
Thanks for the question. And look, it's a very good question, and it is, when I look at the vet space, I guess there is a full range of considerations, from foundation skills, English language skills, skills for new migrants, through to pathways into higher learning and university degrees. Sitting at the core are of course vocational skills. Now, what I think we need to be conscious of is making sure that it's easy and possible in the structures we put in place for people to shift up, to enhance the range of skills they require according to their needs. And I guess take a simple sort of trade type pathway. For some people, all they will be necessarily aspiring to, perhaps have the core capabilities to do, is to achieve the basic sort of level of trade type qualification that enables them to work in that trade. For others, it will be important that they are also able to value add to that qualification small business management, financial and accounting skills, human resource skills, because there are more small business owners in Australia who have a vet qualification than there are small business owners in Australia with a university qualification at present. So making sure that people in that sense are able to look at the career potential and to add and complement their training is really important. And I think the USI will again provide us with a better understanding of where people are adding on those other competencies that may not be core to the particular trade or skill or qualification they're doing, but are essential to turning that into a career, to a business opportunity, to a growth product. Now, in terms of what that means for the type of reforms we've applied, and particularly the reforms to training package content, well, I think the two can happily coexist. That we do want to make sure that where people are learning the trade skills, they are relevant to actually doing that trade job. But that doesn't mean that we're not also ensuring the training package content is there for the small business skills that people could value add on top of that, because they will equally be being assessed and validated by people with knowledge and understanding of what's required for operating a small business in terms of human resource or accounting or marketing or all of those other attributes. So I think it's important to realise that, yes, we are saying industry should be very much driving what the competencies are, but we are still talking about the full suite and spectrum of competencies, not just narrowing it down to purely saying we would only be providing for those competencies and qualifications in a particular trade or job outcome versus the possibility to expand that to an entire career perspective.
Just take one.
I was interested in your views on the concept of collecting once used many times, and the idea of NCVER being a sort of like encompassing clearinghouse. I'm just wondering whether that's is that an aspiration for the future or something that's being actively worked towards currently?
A little from column A, a little from column B. There are steps certainly at present, taking a look at some of the survey work that ASQA does versus the survey work that NCVER does, and trying to assess whether perhaps we can have NCVER do that in a way that is comprehensive enough. Frankly, it's probably more comprehensive than what ASQA does already, but in a way that gives ASQA the information it wants or needs to do its job. I'm confident that at a federal government level we can continue to drive those types of reforms that ensure that we become a responsible entity when it comes to the principle of collect once, use many times. The next great challenge is then getting the states and territories on board in terms of what they do, and especially where they're contracting training providers through their own different subsidy arrangements. Now that's a bit of a harder task. At a principles level, the states are relatively happy with it. I hear certain stories that before my time in the portfolio there was general agreement around the ministerial table to progress to that type of approach last year, and that somehow it sort of got unpicked in the weeks or months after the ministers reaching agreement. But it's well and truly on the agenda for me to take back to the next meeting with my state and territory counterparts in November this year. We're having a look at the type of proposals that we can work up in that space. I want to see some concrete action and some concrete steps, and I see no particular reason why the states and territories couldn't, with a little effort, and everybody gets a bit territorial in these sorts of things, but with a little effort, agree to harmonise the information that they require as part of their contracting arrangements. And if they're harmonising it, then it becomes easier to have NCVER collecting it on behalf of all of those states and territories, which is particularly important for those training providers who operate across multiple jurisdictions.